Well, welcome to another episode of National Divorce Talk Raw, where we will cover the uncomfortable, distasteful, difficult, awkward to discuss issues that most people, and certainly the mainstream news, will not go into depth and will not make sure that you're educated on. Now, the point of this is not to pick on America. It's simply to show that when we talk about the idea of California seceding or going more its own way as a nation, this isn't a radical or crazy idea. The ship that California is attached to is sinking in real and significant ways. And it is rational as Californians, all 40 million of us, to think about, do we want to sink with the America ship, or can we sail alone on our own? Now, every newspaper who's talked about Calexit has said maybe it's a radical idea, but they've all said that California would be much richer on its own and can certainly survive as a nation. I want to be clear. A lot of the people that criticize the idea of Calexit never say California couldn't survive as a nation financially. They never say California couldn't make it as its own nation. They just have other reasons why that's a bad idea. One of the major reasons is life is so good with America. And if you left California from America, you lose all the American protections. So I wanted to point out to you today that the main criticism of Calexit and why it's not a reasonable or rational plan is garbage, because America is already falling down. It is not a reliable partner. It is not the social safety net you think that it is, and it will not be there for you in the future. And Californians, the ship is sinking that you are sitting on right now, and you had better figure out a way how to save your own lives. Not hyperbole, I'll show you. Now, again, a lot of this news is out there. It's covered by mainstream sources, but they don't really focus on it. And so obviously you wouldn't be aware of it. We package it here together at National Divorce Talk Raw so that you can see the awkward conversations and the realities of the way the world really is, and not the pretty rose-colored glasses interpretation the mainstream media wants to present to you. Well, let's get right into it. We're going to do share screen. So the first one is from the Edelman Trust Index. So this is on page 21. I'll show you the beginning. So the Edelman Trust Barometer is one of the most recognized surveys of trust the public has with different countries. It looks at a variety of different countries around the world, and it measures how much trust people in those countries feel that they have with their government and their media and their politicians and even their people themselves in that country. And then it looks at all those countries and gives you an overview of how well trust is going around the world and in nations compared to other nations. Of course, the second that I'm on a show, someone calls. Never fails. Never fails. Got to turn off that phone when I do a show because, here we go. So trust has fallen in democracies. And as we can see here, so trust is blue, has gone up. Distrust is red, means that there's less trust in the population and it has gone down. So as you can see, America has declined 10 points in trust since 2017. That's up to 2022. Now that's not just Trump, that includes also Biden. So this poll was taken this year, 2022. Biden's been in presidency for about a year and a half. So they're looking at Trump and Biden, and they're also looking at the last year of Obama. So this includes Obama, this includes Trump, and this includes at least a year of Biden. So it's not just all Trump, I want to be very clear. And as you can see, America has fallen in trust along with countries such as Russia, Spain, Argentina, South Africa, and Colombia. Now, yes, Germany's there and the UK's there, but I want to point out, look, here's trust in America at about 43%, and here's trust in Russia at about 32%. So the American people trust their government only slightly better than the Russian people trust their government. And if we look at these other things, trust in the government for China has gone up, United Arab Emirates has gone up, Indonesia, India, Saudi Arabia, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, Kenya. Trust is maintained in Mexico, the Netherlands, Canada, Australia, Italy, Brazil, Ireland, and France. But trust has gone down definitely in these countries: Colombia, South Africa, Argentina, Spain, America, and Russia. Now that also includes such good countries as Germany, South Korea, and Japan. But you can also see where America and the people who trust their government is going down. Biggest losers in trust, the United States government at -5 points. Biggest gainers in trust, China, the UAE, and Thailand. China's gone up about 11 points. United Arab Emirates has gone about now 9 points. Now, they're interviewing the people in that country and asking them. So this isn't what do Chinese people think of America. This is what do Americans think of America. And Americans' trust in their own government has gone down significantly, 10 points since 2017, including the last year of Obama, all 4 years of Trump, and the first year of Biden. Let's go to point 2. So this is from Salon Magazine. It came out March 15th. That's relatively recently. Is America the world's greatest democracy in 2022? We don't even crack the top 50. Co-author of a new Freedom House report on the decline of democracy talks about how the U.S. fell so far, so fast. And I'll skip a lot of this for you, but we can go down to, here you go. Okay, well, I had it highlighted. Give me a second here. According to Freedom House's ranking of democratic health and freedom, the U.S. rating has dropped by 10 points in the last decade. 10 points is exactly what the Edelman Trust Barometer survey also said. Now, this is Freedom House, a separate organization from the Edelman Trust Barometer Group. So Edelman Trust Barometer Group says faith in America has dropped 10 points by the American people. Freedom House is also saying at the same time that freedom and democracy in America has dropped 10 percentage points. So you're going to see that 10 percentage points for both of them in the last decade. A decade is 10 years. It's not just 4, which means you cannot blame this exclusively on Trump. You would have to include the other people involved, which would include Obama and Biden along with Trump. According to Freedom House's ranking of democratic health and freedom, the U.S. rating has dropped by 10 points in the last decade to 83 points out of a possible 100. That score puts the U.S. roughly 62nd for freedom and democratic health in the world, below every major Western European nation and many others as well, and about even with Panama, Romania, and South Korea. On the specific measure of political rights, Freedom House ranks U.S. lower than such often troubled nations as Poland, Bulgaria, South Africa, and only 1 point above Brazil. So, America. Experts around the world say that the freedom that you have is equivalent to what you can find in Bulgaria, South Africa, and Poland. And they say that your democratic government functions about as well as Panama and Romania. That's horrible. God awful. And it's, again, 10% decline, which matches this one, about a 10% decline in the Edelman Trust Index. We have a 10% decline in Freedom House's rankings. And again, that comes from this report from Salon, and it comes from this report from the Edelman Trust Index. Both recently published. So let's take a look at this. American Decline, Perception or Reality on the Hill magazine. Now, that's an American-based publication. This came out on April 5th, and it talks about American Decline, Perception or Reality. And let's go to, boy, it erased all my, a recent poll by the European Council on Foreign Relations revealing that public opinion within the NATO alliance overwhelmingly believes that within a decade, China will be more powerful than a politically broken United States, also contain the alarming message that similar majorities believe their country should remain neutral in any potential conflicts between the US, China, or Russia. So right now that Russia is invading Ukraine, there's a lot of talk in America about how great NATO is and how wonderful NATO is and how America should be close to its partners. Well, at the same time, America said that now, April 5th, they're saying that now around April 15th, about 10 days before Americans were widely saying, hey, NATO's great. We love being part of NATO. It's such a great thing to be part of this alliance. Look how great it is to work with our European allies. 10 days before you said that, America, the Europeans said in a poll that they believe you are politically broken and that China will be more powerful than you in a decade, and that all these European countries that you exalt as NATO allies say they should remain neutral if America gets into any conflict with China or Russia. So the idea that being part of America gives you an allied space and a lot of supporters in any potential conflict against rival superpowers such as China and Russia is a lie. NATO has said China's going to be, NATO countries, the majority of them, have said China's going to be more powerful than America because America is, quotes, politically broken, not politically damaged, politically broken. They're saying this after Trump and after a year and a half of Biden. Let's get that clear. This is not right after Trump left. This is after a year and a half of Biden and 4 years of Trump. They're not basing this on just Trump. They're basing it on Trump and Biden. That's why they're saying it now, about a year and a half after Biden's been president. And they're saying in any conflict between America, Russia, and China, the European allies who form most of NATO should remain neutral. So California being attached to America will not protect you in a conflict with China or Russia because the rest of the allied nations aren't going to be there to join you. That came out now. This is April 5th, American Decline of Perception Reality on the Hill. Recent poll by the European Council on Foreign Relations. Let's take a look at that. The crisis of American power, how European sees Biden's America. That does not say Trump's America, that says Biden's America. And he's smiling, but most Europeans rejoiced at Joe Biden's victory in November U.S. presidential election, but they do not think he can help America make a comeback as the preeminent global leader. European attitudes towards the U.S. have undergone a massive change. Majorities in key member states, which remembers NATO countries, now think the U.S. political system is broken and that Europe cannot just rely on the U.S. to defend it. They look to Berlin rather than Washington as the most important partner. There are geopolitical consequences to America's weakness. A majority believe that China will be more powerful than the U.S. in a decade, and they want the country to stay neutral in a conflict between the two superpowers. Read that. China or Russia fights America, Europe's going to stay out of it. And the rest, 2/3 of Europe says they should start being able to defend themselves and not rely on America. So why should California rely on America for security guarantees if the European Union itself isn't doing that? There's a great chance for revival of Atlanticism, but Washington cannot take European alignment against China for granted. Public opinion will have a bigger effect on the relationship than it once did and needs to be taken into account. So that's this survey right here, January 2021. So it's about a year ago. But they're looking at Biden, and the Europeans are saying, we're not going to join you in a conflict with China or with Russia. And we think that you're basically permanently broken after Biden was elected, not just Trump. So, yeah, do not count on your allies. Your allies are not counting on America because they view America as permanently broken. America is in the worst level of democracies, equivalent to some of the worst states out there. Let's find that again. Yeah, so America's in league with Panama and Romania and Poland and Bulgaria and South Africa as far as how well it functions and how democratic it is. And again, as we showed you, America has also fallen 10 percentage points in trust from its people, according to this survey. And that also matches this survey by Freedom House saying a 10% decline, and this survey by Edelman showing a 10% decline. So I know that's a lot of data, but the point is basically this. America's in a decline. Freedom House sees it. The Edelman Trust Index sees it. All your NATO allies see it. And they're publicly saying, we're not going to be there for you. And we don't really trust you. And you're basically a failing democracy. Again, you're not going to see it on the mainstream news, but it is all true. Let's go over a little bit more. Now, here's another one. Biden's job approval falls to the lowest level of his presidency amid war and inflation fears. This came out from NBC News on March 27th, 2022. What I want to point out is that they did a poll March 18th to the 22nd. So NBC News did a poll March 18th to the 22nd about 2 weeks ago. And here's what that poll showed. This is the NBC News poll, as you can see. And one of the questions that they asked that they did not mention in this article. So this article talks about how NBC News did a poll and Biden's doing horrible. Not mentioned in this news article at all while they're talking about Biden and Congress is this question. Buried in there, question 16. All in all, thinking about where the United States is today, do you feel we are experiencing a kind of tough times the country faces from time to time? Or is the start of a longer-term decline where the U.S. is no longer the leading country in the world? Let's repeat that. The question from NBC News to Americans 2 weeks ago. All in all, thinking about where the United States is today, do you feel we are experiencing the kind of tough times the country faces from time to time? Or is this the start of a longer-term decline where the U.S. is no longer the leading country in the world? Well, the results today are 42% of Americans said, hey, this is just a tough time and we'll get through it. And 53% said this is the start of a long-term decline. So not even half of Americans, or not even close to half of Americans, believe this was just a tough time that we'll get through. Over half, a majority of Americans, more Americans than voted for Joe Biden to be president, more Americans than voted for Joe Biden to be president are now saying America's in a long-term decline. Now, the last time Americans said that was in 2011, when the global economic recession was the worst possible. So in about 10 years, we've gone from, you have the global economic recession and Americans say we're part of a permanent decline, a majority of them, more than elected Joe Biden. And then for the second time in 10 years, another thing has happened and Americans are again coming back to the conclusion of this is a long-term decline and a majority of them are saying that. These are the key statistics. Experiencing a tough time, 42% this year. Start of a longer-term decline, 53% this year. Experiencing a tough time, 2011, 40%. Start of a longer-term decline, 54%. So a majority of Americans during the worst of the global economic recession thought that America was losing its global leadership and was going into a lower place on the world stage permanently. Then it rebounded. And now we're back to where a majority or more people than voted for Joseph Biden in America now believe America is going into a long-term decline. Is it a coincidence then that when we ask Americans, and a majority of Americans say we see ourselves going into a long-term decline, that Freedom House at the same time is saying you've declined 10 points in democracy. And the Edelman Trust Index is saying you've declined 10 points in how trustworthy your people see you. And NATO allies are now saying we can't trust you to be a functional country and we view you as a permanently broken democracy. And they're specifically talking about Joe Biden after Trump. So your NATO allies are saying you look broken. Freedom House, a international global ranking committee, says you've dropped 10 points to the level of dysfunctional democracies. The Edelman Trust Index also looks at countries around the world and says you've dropped 10 points to not well functioning countries. And now we have an NBC News poll saying a majority of Americans, for the second time in 10 years, view America as going into a long-term decline. Coincidence? Freedom House, Edelman, NBC News, NATO allies, all coming to the same conclusion. Two separate global ranking committees, a variety of European countries, and a domestic American news agency all coming to the same conclusion that America no longer works and is going into a permanent decline. Well, let's top it off with this last bit of news. Here you go. What an incredible chance coincidence that around the same time, a few days ago, U.S. life expectancy continues historic decline with another drop in 2021. So here's CNN saying America is declining, historic levels of decline. Another study finds. So we already had one of the highest death expectancies or lowest life expectancies for a modern country in the world. And guess what? It dropped even more recently. So we already had one of the globally worst declines in health and longevity for the population in the planet amongst OECD or Western nations. And then it dropped even more. Now, you might say it's COVID, and they point at COVID too. But here's another thing. Among a set of 19 peer countries, life expectancy dropped only a third as much in the US. Among a peer of 19 countries, peers, life expectancy dropped only 30% as much as it did in America, and it rebounded in 2021. Whereas America, life expectancy dropped 3 times as much as its European allies and never rebounded and continued to go down. So life expectancy is going down. Life expectancy for Americans is going down. Trust in their government is going down. The ability of America to be a functional democracy is going down. NATO allies no longer trust America, and NBC News asked people recently, and a majority of Americans said they believe they're in permanent decline. Given all of these facts from mainstream sources, why does it make sense for California to not have a conversation about getting in its own boat so that it can survive and thrive in the future? Because being attached to America no longer provides the benefits that it once did. Thank you, and we'll see you again next episode.